Hello and welcome to episode 65 of the Sales Syndicate podcast. Madness. I've had a few weeks off, maybe even a couple of months off recording, so I'll just caveat or at least get this out of the way that it might not be a great episode. I've also got a sore throat, so if I do cough, I do apologize. But we're going to be talking about how you can go above and beyond with prospecting and outreach in 2024. I think it's an apt time to do it. I think this episode will go live start of Feb. So once everyone's got back up to speed, like we were just discussing before we hit the record button, because I think January's been a bit of a tough one for me so far. So hopefully by February, this will be very, very useful indeed. But before we jump in to that discussion, I'll hand over to my guest to introduce themselves and also the company. So over to you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll keep it pretty short and sweet. Again, same as you, I'm kind of getting back into the swing of things. So my name is probably at capacity of what I can do right now. So Charlie Johnson, Salesloft. Salesloft is a sales engagement solution that helps kind of any revenue team to book more meetings, close more deals, shorten sales cycles, whatever it might be. I've been at Salesloft for, I think this year it's 4 years, so that's pretty crazy. So I've been here for quite a while now. And that's me, really.
And you've gone from SDR up to AE. Is it SMB? Am I right?
Yeah, so SDR. I was an SDR for so long. I was an SDR for like 4 years. And then I think only at my last company and at Salesloft did the SDR role like actually click as to like what it is and how to do it like well. So then kind of increased my skills quite a lot at Salesloft. And yeah, then went on to AE where I'm still basically an SDR. I am still doing a lot of my own prospecting as well. So never lose it.
And you do some bits on the side, I guess you could call it, in terms of LinkedIn, training, consultancy, bit of everything really. Do you want to explain that side of things as well?
So I have like a side business where, I do a range of things from like consultancies. I'm also at the moment working on another course as well. So hopefully that will be out, I'm going to say March, April. I've been working on it. So hopefully there'll be a nice prospecting course that I can add to the list. But yeah, I have a guide at the moment and yeah, do some consultancy stuff as well.
So I think that's how I came across your profile when you jumped on another podcast. I think you grew massively in last year, didn't you? Am I right? From a follower's perspective.
Oh yeah. I think it was last year, or do you know what? It was in the space of like 4 months. I've been posting consistently for a while. It wasn't very good consistently at the beginning. Like my posts were awful. But yeah, it was like in the space of like, I think 4 months where suddenly it just kind of rocketed. And ever since it's been pretty consistent. So yeah, consistency wins, guys.
Yeah, I think it was, if you listen to Stephen Barley, I think he did the Diary of a CEO for like a year, maybe even 2. And it was pretty much static. Like their performance was just like really, really slow. And then suddenly it just literally, like, I think they call it hockey stick growth, don't they? Where it literally just went absolutely mad. And I think they say the same thing about LinkedIn. It can take years of posting consistently before anything happens.
Yeah.
And then it just suddenly does, even though you haven't really changed anything. Okay, then. So going above and beyond in 2024, I think 2024 feels like after 2022, 2023, like the coming out of COVID and all of that stuff that we're not going to cover, that 2024 is going to potentially be a big year. It feels like it anyway. I don't know whether everyone I speak to thinks 2024 is going to be a big year. Fingers crossed, yeah.
Tough. Like last year was tough, like really tough, especially on the prospecting front. It was really difficult. Like I always prospect. My pipeline is probably like 40-50% self-sourced. So I'm always prospecting. And do you know what? Stuff that I was doing last year in 2023, that I was like stuff I was doing in 2022 that was working, I was doing it in 2023 and it's just getting nothing from it. So it's been crazy. So I hope this year it becomes a bit easier.
What were some of those noticeable changes? And you mentioned there some of the tactics just weren't working anymore. So for 2023, you touched on the fact that it was quite tough. Do you want to just give us a couple of like nuggets of information as to why you think that was or how it was?
I think it's like because like certain things became new to prospecting, or not new, became more known to prospecting. So things like video prospecting, as well as like more like trigger personalization. So with video prospecting, I remember I think God, I don't even know what year it is now. In 2022, I could send a video to like 10 people, and I was guaranteed like 3 responses. If I didn't get a reply from 10 videos, I'd be like, what? What's happening? Whereas now you do that, you get 0 replies. And it's like just from doing a video and having a personalized video, you would get a response. And it's like, it's not really a channel that I'm really using at the moment. It's just not really working as well for me on the prospecting side. I still use it in the rest of my sales cycle. And then from the trigger element, I could send an email to all of the people I know who are hiring SDRs with a pretty similar message being like, hey, great to see your team is growing. I can see you're hiring an SDR. Usually when I'm speaking to people who are hiring SDRs, they have these 2 challenges, there's something on your mind, and people would reply quite easily. And it's like last year, nothing to that. Like these triggers, like I see you're hiring SDRs, everyone is using it. So it wasn't enough to like warrant a reply. It was basically the same as saying, hey, I can see you're in marketing. So our prospects are just getting inundated with like that level of personalization, which was enough before, but then it wasn't enough last year. So then you have to go a step further up, which then this year probably isn't going to be enough. So it's like, I think prospecting, and it's exciting, but I think it is evolving a lot. And like, you need to be way more strategic this year, even last year, to even get a reply.
Yeah, it kind of sounds like that natural evolution of year on year. The bar is just raised, and perhaps last year with the introduction of AI and ChatGPT and all these things that helped efficiencies, that the bar was just raised that much more. Which is interesting, I think, because I think 2024 we're going to see some very, very interesting tactics, some out of the box thinking that I don't think we will have seen. But we're going to be talking about. I think we've got like 5 or 6 key ways that you can go above and beyond in this chat. So I think naturally a good place to start would be that point that we've just covered. So it's like, what is no one else going to be doing? Like thinking outside of the box. So how have you approached that? Like, have you started, January thinking, right, here's my goals for 2024, this is how I'm going to approach it? Or is it like a weekly, monthly ideation sort of thing?
So I think I always I'm a bit of a loser. I actually think about this stuff all the time. And I love it. So yeah, I'm a bit of a loser in that respect. So I'm always thinking about like, what is going to change? What do I need to do? So it's not necessarily like a monthly or weekly thing that I'm like writing down what I need to do. I'm like constantly thinking about it.
So these ideas come into your head at the worst possible time. So you're in the shower, or when you put your head down on a pillow, and it's just in your head.
Yeah. I have Evernote on my phone, and like ask my partner, I'll be like, we'll be food shopping, and I'll be like, oh, I had a great idea. I'm like picking up bananas, and I'm like, wild, and it's like, oh, great idea. So yeah, anywhere and everywhere, I just shove it, write it down, so it's out my brain, and then I can pick up another day. But I'm just always thinking. I just find it a really fascinating topic, which is why I'm always thinking about it. But what I try and do is I try and put myself in my prospects' shoes and understand like the involvement that they have had over time, and how it must be really annoying for them to be getting at first, hey, I see you're head of marketing, this is what we do, and then all the involvement of like the sales kind of outbound that they're getting. So I try and think, if I'm a buyer, what would I want to receive that is different from all the other salespeople out there who are messaging me? So I try and put it that way. So when I'm then going to prospect, and I don't do anything crazy, like I'm not going to be showing up at their door and knocking at a grandma's house and sending like flowers to her grandma, like weird stuff. I'm not going to be doing out the box like that. I'm still going to be using the traditional channels of phone, email, LinkedIn. But when I say like standing out or being different with my like being different is like it's my personalization, which is the main thing I'm talking about. My personalization as well as my approach. So with my personalization, I'm not just going to note down the first thing that I see when I'm researching. For most people, they will use LinkedIn as the first thing that they see when they're researching. So they'll say things like, oh, I see you're hiring this role, or I can see on your LinkedIn profile it mentions this and this, or I can see you've just had funding. It's like, those are really easy things that I can find within 5 seconds. So I'm thinking, what can I do to take it a step further? I might mention that thing is on their job description on their LinkedIn profile, but I'm also going to mention something else. And I want to mention something else that when they read it, they're like, oh, this is juicy. And like they haven't heard it before. So as an example, I reached out to a company and I listened to a webinar that or a podcast they did with someone else. And I took that topic, listened to the whole podcast, took that topic and some of the stuff that they said, also took the fact that they were hiring and then linked that into Salesloft. And it was just like that step further, which is what got me the meeting. If I had said, oh, great webinar on this, or, oh, great that you're hiring SDRs, I don't think those things alone would have got me a meeting. But it's the fact that I did two things, one of them which was time consuming, and the other one which linked well with that point as well. And that's why it got me the meeting. So it's just like thinking, what else can I find out of my research steps? What else can I add that's going to make me stand out? And I think that's a big thing that I'm thinking about at the moment.
Yeah, it kind of that story sort of reminded. I had a chat with Sophie Ellis at Lunio, and there was this story she told me of. She knew this prospect quite well and knew that he was really into cars, but like as a mechanic fixing up cars. So she ended up writing like a whole spiel or set of like campaigns or messages or whatever that referenced or compared click, because it's click fraud that they sell. So it was tying click fraud and fake Google ad clicks to mechanical issues in a car.
Yeah.
And that's how she got the response. And I think that he said it just takes that level of like creativity to stand out. I must get like 5 or 10 messages a day off the back of connections on, like, if we're talking LinkedIn specifically, and they're all, oh, I noticed you're heading up marketing at
I saw that. Yeah. It's boring as well. It's like, it's boring for me to physically write that. Like, I'm bored writing that. I noticed that. I'm so bored writing that, and they're bored receiving it. So it's like, try and be different, but also try and have a bit of fun with it, because prospecting can be fun as well. I don't know if you know Harry Hudson. He used to be so good at linking. He used to work at Salesloft, and now he's at Sourcewell. He used to link like sport and football and rugby and all this stuff to Salesloft. It's just not a skill I can physically do. But he used to do that, and it used to be like really funny and like really fun mail that people just enjoyed reading and enjoyed responding to. Also sets you up for the rest of the sales cycle. If someone replies to my message and it's just dull and like really like templated and boring, they don't really want to speak to me, because they probably think that I'm also going to be a bit of a robotic person. I'm going to really force them down a sales cycle. Whereas if I'm a bit more myself, authentic, and just being a bit different, they might be like, actually, this person is going to be more consultative and is going to be a bit more fun to speak to, rather than the others that are just a bit more robotic as well. So I try and like always be myself, just to also kind of show them, look, if you take a call with me, I'm not going to shove Salesloft down your throat. I'm actually genuinely going to try and understand more about you. And if it's not a fit, it doesn't really matter. But I am a human, and I'm a bit of fun as well. So hopefully that kind of transfers into the rest of the sales cycle as well, from that initial outreach message.
I think that's massive. I think the cookie cutter sales rep, like the cookie cutter SDR, it's just. I think I'm hoping this is the year where it dies off. Like,
I don't think it ever will. I just don't think it ever will, and it's such a shame. But I just don't think it ever will. Yeah.
Fingers, yeah. Maybe it's industry. I think like selling to sales reps or selling to marketers, it feels like probably more forward thinking than other industries, like old school industries.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'll see. And Salesloft, we've seen you at a couple of events this year. So I know events and sort of face-to-face stuff was another thing we were going to speak about. I've been lucky enough to meet quite a few of the Salesloft team at events, and you can't replicate that face-to-face interaction and actually meeting them. So I know you sort of touched on that being a focus for you in 2024, whether that be events or more personable one-to-one stuff. So do you want to just cover that?
Yeah. So on the event side, that's more for like prospecting side, right? So like And you can sign up to so many events. If you go onto the Excel website, or I can't remember what it's called. Just type in events in Europe. There are so many free events where you can walk the floor at, and just literally find an event that has all your ICP and just walk around. You'll have some customers there, so you can go say hi to your customers as well, and then be like to other people, oh yeah, I'm just visiting a customer at the moment. They are this company over there and just wanted to have a look, and then just speak to people and ask questions. Because usually, like, especially for me and for people selling to marketing, when you go to these events, there is always like a marketer there, and there's also a senior salesperson there as well as the reps who can give me insight into what their process is, and any challenges they have and who I should be reaching out to as well. So I can just walk around, I can get some free lovely swag, and I can speak to some of my target accounts as well, so they know my name and they know my face. So then when I am following up with them later on, then at least they kind of recognize me as well, like face to a name and everything. But at my last company, we used to book a crazy amount of meetings from walking the floor. It was something we'd probably do most weeks, just go to an event, walk the floor, chat to people and book meetings in that way. I think this will be a lot bigger, like face-to-face meetings. I think this will be a lot bigger. Like now we're way past kind of COVID times. I know we've seen success from it, and you don't have to physically be exhibiting at an event to book meetings from an event. You can still walk the floor and get to know people. I love the idea of doing things different at events. Like you could even like do like mini interviews with people and being like, hey, I'm part of Salesloft. Do you know Salesloft? And they'll be like, yes or no. We're just doing some mini interviews with our ICP, and we're going to ask them one question. And you can go and ask them the question, do a mini interview with your ICP. And then it's just such an easy segue into like understanding a bit more about them, understanding their challenges, seeing if it's a fit. And it's like, and you get great content out of it as well. So I just think like, I love the idea of walking the floor, meeting people, but maybe also creating some content while you're there as well.
No, it's weird, isn't it? Because I think pre-COVID, or at least maybe 2 or 3 years ago, when you would say the word event, it was like, yeah, right, it's going to cost us like 20 grand plus for a stand, and it's just are we going to get ROI? And I think it's a lot more normal now, like you said, to see people just walking the floor and just generally like interacting with people like on a budget as cheaply as possible. And I think last year we did like 3 or 4 events, and we didn't exhibit any of them. We literally just 2 or 3 of us turned up with a camera and a microphone.
Yeah,
We
it's
recorded
so good.
content for the podcast, and it was such a good way of meeting people, getting the brand out there. But then, as you said, like it naturally like segues into a soft sales conversation more often than not anyway.
And if you do want to have like a presence there, you can just like rent a bar next door or something like that, or rent a space in a bar or a restaurant next door, and then just invite people there to have drinks. And then that's your way of kind of gathering everyone like to a place that's your booth, but you're not having to pay tens of thousands as well. But yeah, I love that. I just love the idea of just doing little interviews there and then just getting to know people as well. And so I think like networking will be a big part of this year. But also something that I do as well is I always ask people, like, as soon as I've booked a meeting, I'll be like, where's your office? And if they are local to me, I'm either going to take them out for lunch, take them out for a coffee, invite them to my office, or go to their office. And I think when you have these face-to-face meetings, it's just a completely different dimension to having these over the Zoom ones. It's like I get to find out so much about this person, what they enjoy, and like on a personal, like friendly level, as well as on a business level as well. And people are just way more open when you meet them face to face as well. So I try and do that. And if I can do my demos in their office, I want to do that as well, because at the end of the day, if I physically met you in person, I've taken you out for lunch and coffee, and you go with a competitor as an example, you're not going to ghost me. You're going to tell me, because we have that closer relationship to warrant like actual transparency, rather than the scenario where they go with a competitor or it's not good timing and someone just ghosts you. It just creates like a completely different relationship with prospects. So I think face to face are really great. You can even like go to their office and offer to do like best practice sessions, or things like that is something I like to do. Or we've just got a new office, so God, I am going to invite people or their SDR teams to our office to do best practice sessions, because it's just like creates such depth to the rest of the sales cycle as well when you get to meet them face to face.
It's weird, isn't it? How it kind of like how fashion goes in and out like every few years. How face to face. I know COVID was a massive sort of factor, but how face to face meetings are coming back in, and how taking someone out for coffee or taking them out for lunch now is seen as like going above and beyond. Whereas before it would have been like,
Normal,
wait,
yeah.
you haven't bought me a coffee. That's
Yeah.
you're a bit cheap. Like,
Yeah.
it's weird how it's coming back in, but it's. Yeah, if someone said to me, "Oh, yeah, I'm Cardiff based. Let's pop out for lunch," I'd be like, "Okay, this is different. I like this."
Especially in that topic of like standing out. How many SDRs have asked you to meet face to face or take you for a coffee? Or it's always virtual coffee or virtual lunch through a reach desk, as an example. But actually, to stand out, offering to actually physically come and take them for coffee or take them for lunch, it's like, firstly, they're not going to no-show you because you've made the effort. But secondly, it's completely different, and they're actually going to want to meet you rather than just potentially like fobbing off your calendar invite.
Yeah, it's an interesting. I mean, I'm hoping someone offers to take me out for lunch. That'd be quite nice. So, if anyone's listening to this and wants to sell to marketing and is based in Cardiff, hit me up.
Give
That'd
me
be
some
great.
lunch.
As long as it's pasture or parallel, like as long as I can choose the place, that's brilliant. Okay, then. So I think one of the other things we were chatting about just before we jumped on actually was how you actually team up with other people that work at Salesloft. And I've not really heard about this as a tactic, because I think maybe traditionally, I don't know, maybe the misconception is that sales reps are quite selfish in that it's my prospect and my pipeline and my process. I don't want anyone else getting involved because then they might take some credit for it. So do you want to just talk about that teaming up strategy you mentioned?
I do this all through my sales cycle as well. I don't know a single deal that I have closed where it's just me. Like, all of my deals will have other people from Salesloft involved, just to ensure that it's like doing everything we physically can to win that person's business. But from a prospecting point of view, I don't know why there is this like conception of like a CEO being up here and an SDR being down here. And it's ever since I first moved into the SDR role, I almost felt daunted speaking to someone who was quite senior. And there was that big step. I always thought CEOs speak to CEOs, CROs speak to CROs, blah, blah, blah. And yes, an SDR can book a meeting with a CEO as an example, but it's just a lot harder. Whereas for some bizarre reason, when you have a CEO reaching out to a CEO, CRO, CFO, CFO, whatever it is, they're more likely to respond to that person. So I take that into my prospecting as well. So I will do my research and I will reach out to a company for a week or two by myself. If I'm not getting any traction from them, I'm then going to find my prospects and find someone at Salesloft that I can get them to message them. I'll do all the research. I will prep the email as well. Salesloft has this really great tool that I think it's available only on Gmail. It's called Draft on Behalf. And it's just an extension. And what it does is you click on Draft on Behalf, you put in the person's email that you wanted to send it to. So CFO at whoever, IBM.com. And then you put in your CFO's email address. You put in the subject line and the message you want to send. You then insert that on Draft on Behalf and it populates as a link. So when you send it to your CFO, they don't have to copy and paste anything. They just click a link and it's going to populate an email for them. And they just press send. They can read through it and it's just going to populate that email for them. So it's such a good tool. And I honestly use it all the time, from prospecting to the rest of my sales cycle. But yeah, I will get them to message my prospect. And the response rate from getting like a CRO to a CRO, etc., is really, really high. And it's just a great way of getting into your target accounts as well, especially if you've done everything you physically can from your side. Then I'm going to try and get someone else to do it. When we were SDRs as well, we would also swap accounts as well. We weren't so precious about holding on to accounts as well. So I'd have a go at a tier 1 target account. I'd have a go at them for a month or 2 months, whatever it might be. And then I might swap it with someone else. Because at the end of the day, like, if you keep seeing Charlotte Johnson at Salesloft, you're going to be like, oh, bore off. You want to like see a fresh name, right, or a fresh face. And so if you start then seeing people like, I don't know, Lizzie Stamp, one of my colleagues, you start seeing her name at Salesloft, you might be more susceptible to replying to her. And so I can give Lizzie one of my accounts and she can give me one of hers, and then we just work them and keep them. So I think some people are a bit precious over keeping really good accounts, but actually when you switch them up, when someone sees more names from a company and more faces, they're more, and on different channels as well, they're more likely to respond than just seeing Charlotte Johnson at salesloft.com on LinkedIn calling and email as well.
That's interesting. It's kind of like listening to that. It kind of makes me think of multi-threading, but internal. So you're you're internally
I call
multi-threading.
it multi-threading from our side, but maybe internal multi-threading sounds better.
They coined a new phrase, internal multi-threading. I think the only other person, Jack Nico, sort of touched on it, but for him it was more like deal management towards the end of getting it across the line. He spoke about multi-threading internally to help get it across the line, but I really like that idea of multi-threading to break into an account. And you're the first person who's sort of touched on that, so that's a very interesting take on teaming up. And yeah, it's really rare. It's refreshing, but it's really rare to hear people sharing accounts, switching accounts, and seeing it as one team, which it is. But more often than not, it's like, no, these are my 50 target accounts.
Yeah,
Get your own.
AEs, I think it's less flexibility on just switching accounts for the sake of it. But as SDRs, I don't see any issue in swapping accounts when you're prospecting into them, especially if they're the same level. Like, I think I definitely would recommend it if I was an SDR still.
Now the one we've got on the list next is similar, but it's using mutual connections to your advantage, specifically LinkedIn. So how does that differ to the internal multi-threading? Is it using mutual connections that you can see that might not necessarily be internal, as in mutual connections to people at Salesloft? It could be other people.
So you can do that as well. So with using with the internal multi-threading, that person from Salesloft doesn't know that prospect. With the next approach, the person from Salesloft or whoever it might be is connected to that prospect. So there might be some kind of tie or relationship there. I think what I'm going to describe is when it's someone from your company. But if you're close enough to someone else and you know they're connected to someone you're prospecting, there is zero harm asking someone and just saying, look, can I be a bit cheeky and ask you if you know this person well? The worst they're going to say is, sorry, I don't feel comfortable doing it. And that's fine. But I actually had one of my target accounts that I have been hounding for a very long time. And I reached out to someone that I've met over Zoom. And that's it really, but I don't know them particularly well. And I saw they were connected to my prospect who I've been trying to get after for so long. And I asked them to reach out to her, and he said yes, reached out, and I got loads of great information about that prospect. Wasn't a good fit for Salesloft at this time, but great, that saves my time, right? So you can do it with mutual connections. I think just be really human and be like, look, I know this is a really cheeky ask, but I really want to get into this account, and I know you're connected to this person. Would you feel uncomfortable if I asked you to message them on my behalf? And if they say no, that's fine, like completely fine. But the other way is you can use on Sales Navigator, there's Team Link Intro, and then there's also Exec Team Link Intro. I think that's what it's called. It's changed. It used to be under Spotlights, but now it's under Best Path In. So they've changed the position of it, in case you can't find it, because I couldn't find it. I nearly cried. But it's under like Best Path In, and it says Executive Team Link Intro. Ideally, that's the one that I want to click, because then it's showing an exec at Salesloft who's connected to my prospect, essentially. And what you can do is you can actually just upload a list of your Salesforce accounts into SalesNav, filter via the seniority, and then click that exec team link intro. And it's going to show you all the accounts that you own, the correct seniority, and all of the people within those accounts who are then connected to an exec at Salesloft, as an example. So then I'll go through those. I will open it up in LinkedIn, because I think most exec teams don't have Sales Navigator. So make sure you open it up in LinkedIn, send it to the person who's connected on Salesloft side, and just ask, do you know this person? And if they say no, I'm probably just going to ask them to message them anyway. But I've had scenarios where someone at Salesloft was like, that's my neighbor. And I was like, what? He was like, yeah, that's my neighbor. And I was like, can you message him? And he just WhatsApped him and got me a meeting the next day. And I was like, I've been targeting this company for a long time. And you WhatsApp him and I have a meeting the next day. So it's like, you sometimes don't know about the relationships that people have on your company's side with prospects. So just asking from that list, the executive team link intro, just asking them, do you know this person? And if they say yes, how do you know them? And then asking to just draft a message on behalf of you as well. So I've done a what's it called? A newsletter post on this, so I can share the link with it. But I cannot tell you how many meetings I booked. I think it was like November and December. I booked a crazy amount of meetings from this approach. And I've really filled up my pipeline from it. So it's something I really recommend to do.
That's interesting. I think, one, if only all of them were neighbours, right? That'd be great.
I dream.
Two, I think I do a similar thing with a podcast of like towards the end of the podcast, I'll say, who would you recommend I speak to and why? And then I'll use that as the introduction to the person I've never met. And I think that's how I got Tom Boston on, because I think, I don't know, I think perhaps you commented on one of my posts or I commented on one of yours, and then Tom was referenced, and then I tagged Tom and I was like, how about coming on then, Tom? And that's how I got Tom. And I think that cheekiness is just another one of those things that separates the really like boring robotic with the people who actually have a personality. And I'd much rather talk to people who are openly cheeky, like Jack and Zach from We Have a Meeting, all over LinkedIn. You'd much rather have a 30-minute demo from those guys than someone else.
He's just reading from a script, and you can tell when it's going to be one of those demos of someone reading from a script and feature bashing you from their outreach as well. So you can tell.
Yeah. Offering up your time for free. So speaking about, obviously earlier in this podcast, about all the stuff that you share on LinkedIn and that newsletter tip you just gave there, as well as Jack and Zach, who share a ton of information. When you say offering up your time for free, people's alarm bells are probably ringing like, I don't have any free time. How on earth can I offer it up for free? So do you want to just explain what you mean by that?
Yeah. So as an example, like, and this is part of like some of the strategy that I'm going to be changing for 2024 as well. I just think for me to get into a target account who has never heard of Salesloft before, I just can't get in the way that I used to get in with like highlighting challenges. I need to be known within their company and within their team. So this is for tier 1 accounts. I would not do this for a tier 3 or like a medium tier 2 account. This is only for my really target accounts that I'm desperately trying to get into. I will obviously at first go in with the approach of just the normal challenges, kind of typical sales structure, see if I can do it that way. But if not, I'm going to offer my time in regards to, I'm going to find out what the team maybe are struggling with when it comes to pipeline gen. Because if anyone says they're not struggling with no areas of pipeline gen, then they're lying. So I'm going to find out what it is, and then I'm going to offer to do a best practice session on that topic. I will not mention Salesloft once, and I will promise that to them. All I'm going to do is I'm going to spend 30 minutes with your team on a area that I am good at, and I'm going to help them with LinkedIn messaging or cold calling, whatever it might be. And that is it. I am then known within that team. I've built credibility, which will then give me a nice path into any other senior leadership. But it also means that I'm connected to the lower level team as well. I can get to know them. I can understand their challenges. And then I can use that when going to more senior people, or I can get them to introduce me to their managers as well. And it doesn't always lead to anything. But most of the time it's kind of like gets my name known. And I had a situation recently where I did a best practice with a company about 2 years ago, kept in contact with them. I think I did 2 over the years. They came back to me in December saying, hey, we're going to evaluate this in January, like 2 years later, because they know who I am and they remembered me. I spent the time and effort with their team, and I helped their team book more meetings from a certain channel. And then when timing is right, guess who they've contacted? Me, of course. So although it is more of a long game, just, and obviously this won't work with every persona you're targeting. Obviously, if you're selling like, I don't know, financial services, and you're not really completely clued up about that, it's a bit more difficult to do like a best practice session with that. But especially when you're selling to like sales or marketing or like any revenue kind of role, it makes it a lot easier to kind of share best practices around things. So I'll do that, but I'll also add kind of, I'll use this to encourage someone to jump on a discovery call with me as well. So I will say, at the end, like if there is not a fit in this call, I will at least ensure that you leave with the top 2 or 3 tactics, whatever it might be at the time, that we're using at Salesloft that's helping us produce 50 to 60% of our pipeline. And I will share with them at the time what is working for us. So at least if anything, they jump on this call and it's not a fit, they're going to leave with something as well, rather than jumping on a call, not getting anything out of it. They're going to get something out of this call as well. So I think it helps both with, in regards to best practice sessions, getting into the account and getting known into the account. But also if you have that someone who's a bit unsure about joining the discovery call, it also helps push them over to the other side so they want to join it because they're going to get something out of it as well.
It's interesting. So as a marketer sitting here, it just reminds me of that demand gen strategy of giving away stuff for free, something educational, informative, funny, or just something that you can relate to, and you give it away with no expectations of getting anything in return. And research shows that 6 months, 9 months, or 2 years, like the example you gave, they will come back because they built that trust, rapport, that affinity with you over that time. We had a guy called Chris Fenton, I think off the top of my head, jump on the podcast, and he spoke about just playing the long game in sales. And far too often the training for new sales reps is thinking about what's right in front of you, the quick returns rather than playing the long game. And I think playing the long game, not only does it serve you really well for your current position, but if it's another 2-year timeline and you're actually at a different company selling something similar, then it might come back and it might help that pipeline. And for you, it's worked really well for you building your personal brand as well, which we haven't touched on, but that's obviously grown as well off the back of that.
I remember towards the end of being an SDR, I got to the stage where I had people coming to me, not from LinkedIn, but from doing outreach and doing best practice sessions or sharing resources that I had physically created that I thought they would find useful. I had people towards the end of it literally making up half of my target because I had spent so much time like giving out free stuff. So it does come back to you. It might seem at first that you're not getting anything in return, but like long term, it's just way worth it because it does come back. Not everyone's going to come back, and that's fine. At least I get to help someone, but like longer term, people are going to come back.
Yeah, you got to think of it as like a pension, haven't you? Like no one likes paying into their pension. Let's be honest. Like you're like, why am I paying 3%, 5%, 10%, whatever it is, every single year to only really look at the end of the year, you're like, really, I've put
$3,000.
Yeah, wow. But it's exactly like that, isn't it? Like you won't necessarily reap the rewards now, but you'll be thanking yourself when you retire and you've actually got some money to buy food.
Yeah.
Right, the last one we've got on the list is bottom-up approach. Now, I know we've had quite a few discussions over the last year on the podcast about top-down approach and why there's misconceptions about top-down being more difficult and why you should do top-down. But I think bottom-up has had a bit of a bad reputation, perhaps over the last couple of years. But after chatting with you last time, I know that bottom-up is perhaps because people are moving away from it. It's actually sort of coming back.
Delight, yeah. And so I use it for both prospecting, but also in my sales cycles as well. So I try and get to know like the SDRs and AEs of the accounts that I'm prospecting as well. So I'm in a deal cycle in as well. So it helps with that as well. But just focusing on prospecting, I will and like don't reach out to every single SDR, email every single SDR, every single AE, because as soon as I get a LinkedIn message from someone or I get an email from someone, like we'll share it around. So it's going to become pretty obvious if you're just spamming out a message to everyone. And so try and make it personal, but I will just add SDRs, AEs, whoever it is, on LinkedIn, and I'll just message a few of them. I try and like do it vary between someone who's more new and someone who's a bit more tenured. and I'll be like, hey, can I ask you a random question? And that's it. That's all I'll say. And they'll be like, I've never had someone say no. I've had people not reply to me, but most people reply and they're like, go on. And some people then become a bit more fun. They're like, only if it's really random. And then I have to find a really random question to ask
Google
them.
a random question.
But and then I'll be like, look, like being honest, like I'm prospecting your company, and this is the tech stack I had from speaking with whoever last year. Is this still the same? And depending on their response, they might be really blunt and be like, yes or no. Depending on that is whether I keep probing and asking more questions. Most people are open. If people ask me questions, I help. So most people are pretty open. And then I'll ask about their tech stack. I'll start with something really easy, but then I will move on to things like challenges, or I'll say things like, this is the research I've done, and this is the hypothesis I've created. Am I completely wrong? And then they might help and like poke holes in it, or they might tell me what the challenge actually is. I will then ask them to introduce me to the person. I'll be like, look, really cheeky ask, but I'm happy to do it from Salesloft side as well. But it sounds like this is a challenge and this is what we help with. Would you mind actually introducing me? If they say no, it's fine. But a lot of the time people say yes. And if they say no, I can then email that person, the prospect the senior prospect, and be like, speaking with some of the team and they've mentioned XYZ being a challenge, Salesloft solves for this, like, is it worth us chatting? And it goes from guessing a challenge to being 100% certain that this is a challenge, using their language as well. It just makes it like such a more sticky or a more replyable email than being like most demand gen leaders struggle with X, Y, and Z. It's like, your team have physically just told me that this is a challenge and we solve for this. Is it worth us having a chat?
It's an interesting one, because I think, look, as a sales rep, what I guess there's no risk, no negative to another sales rep reaching out to you and you giving them some information. At the end of the day, it's not as if you're, as a sales rep in your company, going to lose out if you refer someone or you give someone a bit of content. Like, you might as well help other reps out, and without getting too like deep and meaningful, it's all like pay it forward, isn't it? It's that the butterfly effect, whatever they call it. The good,
100%.
whatever goes around comes around.
Sales karma is real. I'm 100% sure. Sales karma is real. So if you're one of those people being blunt and being like, no, I'm not going to introduce you to that person, or no, I'm not going to help another human out, another human who is in the same role as you trying to reach their target, if you don't want to help them out, like, sales karma is going to get you. You ain't getting that next deal in, or you ain't getting your target. But if you're nice and you kind of pay it forward, it's like, it will come around to you. And do you know what? It does come around, whether that's you interviewing for another job and crossing paths with someone you helped. It's like, in this space, we all will cross paths. So you might as well be nice and help someone out. I always introduce people to Salesloft. I'll message someone on Slack and I'll be like, hey, I've never met you before, but speaking to someone, they have a cool product. Do we have a competitor to this in place? And they might be like, yeah, actually, we have a competitor in place and it's not renewed until this time. I'll be like, oh, can I intro to you to them? So when it's renewal time, you can speak with them. And they're like, sure. And it's like, it doesn't hurt. And then that's made someone's day. So it's like, nice.
I'm not going to lie, all I heard from the last 4 minutes is sales karma's going to get you.
Yeah.
That's going to be a great clip. Sales karma's going to get you. So, okay, so we've covered, I think, 6 different tactics, strategies there. What are you, from maybe a company perspective, but you as an individual, what are your predictions for 2024 in terms of the way the market's going to go or the way outreach is going to go?
Yeah, so I split it into 3 buckets, I think, and I split it into your normal prospecting with like companies who have never heard of your software offering. I then also have companies who have heard of your software or offering, or they're researching you, like triggers, and then also networking and in person. So I think I'm going to start with the third one. I just think networking and in person is going to become bigger this year. So creating a community, I think, is going to be really important. Meeting people face to face, walking the floor at events, creating your own little events as well, or your own little dinners with other people in your space as well. Like, there's nothing stopping you from doing that. And it's way cheaper than paying for a booth as well.
I think Arthur Castillo at Chili Piper called it nearbound. So nearbound is basically using your existing network or your black book of contacts to sell, and I hadn't heard Nearbound before, but yeah, Nearbound, or what you said basically.
Yeah.
It's no, I had an idea. I posted on LinkedIn talking about gym and running and things, and then I had quite a few people share some advice about running, drop me a message about running, and I was like, maybe I should start like a B2B running club in Cardiff. And it was like that. I was like, that's the sort of perfect time. You go for a run,
100%.
you have a coffee, and like, oh, what do you do, by the way? I'm like, no way. We do, in fact, have a product that would be
Billy Bob over there does that as well, and then you can
yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really great. Like, it doesn't have to be like dinner and drinks or whatever, but like creating like little communities. I just think Mattia's done it really well for SDRs in Germany. Like, they have such a great community. Like, SDRs in Germany have such a great community. And I think like every company could like start to create their own little mini community as well. Like for Salesloft as an example, like we know best practice prospecting. Like, we should be creating like SDR communities or pipeline gen communities, which is then gonna serve us that inbound that we want to get. Don't have to exhibit at a booth, you don't have to spend hundreds of thousands, but it's just kind of creating that community that you're eventually going to get revenue from.
Okay, so is that the one bucket you're saying is going to be like the big focus, or did you want to cover the other two in terms of changes or predictions?
Yeah, I think that one's going to be big. The other two, the one where you don't know, like it's completely cold, I just think you're going to have to be way more strategic, like adding the stuff we've spoken about today, like what did you call it? Internal multi-threading. We're going to have to be doing internal multi-threading, extra personalization. It's like you're going to have to be really strategic to get into these cold accounts. And then I always do things in a weird order. I've gone 3, 1, 2. And then number 2, I think for accounts where you know that they have had a close loss opportunity, there's a trigger or something like that. I think like these trigger events, like a prospect's researching you on Sixth Sense, they've looked at a competitor in G2, they're a closed lost op 5 months ago. I think capitalizing on these triggers is going to become big as well. So yeah, there's my 3, 1, 2.
Badly timed sip of the drink there from me. But there you have it. Three predictions for 2024 off the back of 6 tactics or strategies that hopefully those watching or listening can take some learnings or lessons from. I think there's a couple of bits in there that I think are like really, really good. They're all good, but I think there are a couple of highlights in there that I think will be very, very good. And fingers crossed, maybe we'll trace back in 12 months and see if they came true. We'll get a podcast in for next January, and see if any of them have come true. And in typical fashion, off the back of one of your tips or strategies, I'm going to be really cheeky, and I'm going to ask who I need to speak to on the podcast next and why. And then after, I'm going to get you to intro me.
I'm going to tell you 2 people actually. I'm going to tell you Harry Hudson. I don't think he's as active on LinkedIn at the moment. Harry Hudson is an absolute beast when it comes to prospecting and tactics. If I could have a co-host on a podcast, it would be Harry Hudson. So Harry Hudson at Sourcewell. And then there's someone on my team called as an SDR and in regards to closing deals. So she's a really, really tactical human to be speaking to. So
I think I met Lizzie in Dublin at Sastock, I think.
Oh, did you? Yeah,
I think there were a couple of Lizzies. So I'm like...
there's Lizzie Stewart and Lizzie Stamp, so it makes it difficult.
Which is one of them Glaswegian or Scottish?
That's Lizzie Stewart.
Right,
you want Lizzie Stamp, but Lizzie Stewart's a killer as well.
Yeah, just maybe just don't tell her I mix her up with the I remember having a conversation in Temple Bar with Lizzie Stewart about the fact that she's from the same town as Lewis Capaldi, and we were all like, "Oh, come on, you're not." Every Scottish person says that. Anyway, it was a very good evening in Temple Bar. But no, thank you for jumping on. It's been a really nice first podcast of the year. Ease back into it. A really good chat. So anyone listening and watching, please subscribe, please follow, leave a review, please and thank you. And hopefully we will catch you in the next episode. But Charlie, thank you for jumping on and taking the time.
Thanks for having me.